Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pretend World's Real People. As always, I'm Tyler, and I unfortunately am not in Park City. The Sundance Film Festival started this last weekend. I had plans to go visit, see some people, and just have a blast, but I will say, fortunately, I booked a couple of gigs that created some scheduling conflicts. So it's a good thing. I just have to wait until next year. So if you're out there in Park City and you're listening, have a blast and definitely, I'd say, drink maybe a dozen cups of the Artemis coffee, little coffee shop on the tail end of the strip. Ah, it's delicious. And everybody goes there, so it's really crammed. Just, find a good time to go. Outside of that, auditions and self-tape requests are kicking up, so I hope everybody is breaking a leg for their self-tapes and their in-person auditions. I've definitely worked harder in the last week or so on self-tapes than I had in the last couple of months, which is great. Means the industry is kicking back up and things are really moving ahead. I will say, I want to get right into it. I want to get into this episode because I've been a fan of this week's guest since I was 9 years old when I first saw Final Destination on VHS. I want to say at like 2 in the morning during a sleepover because, you're not allowed to watch inappropriate things when you're a kid. So you think, I'll be safe. I'll watch this really frightening movie at 2 in the morning and nothing will come of it. But something did. I became a horror fan. I, of course, am talking about screenwriter, producer, and director Jeffrey Reddick, a person that I've looked up to for years and had a blast talking to. I do fanboy out a couple of times in this interview, so don't mind that. But we had an amazing chat, longer than I thought we would. I think we went almost into an hour, just talking about his, career, of course, but also his upbringing, where he comes from, what keeps him satiated outside of, writing and being in the industry, and also what he's working on next. So, I should I should say there is a crazy party story at the end that let's limit the ages. So once you get to the party story, just put those headphones in, parents, and listen to it secretly. But yeah, I had a blast talking to him. I can't wait to hopefully chat with him later on in the future because he was just a joy. So let's get into the interview. Let's sit down and have an amazing talk with Jeffrey Reddick.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Reddick. I'm a screenwriter, director, producer, and sometimes actor.
Oh, sometimes actor. How often is sometimes? I gotta hear more about this.
I wish it was all the time. No, that's what my dream was growing up was being an actor. Little difficult in the 90s. There wasn't a lot of my agent told me I was an ethnic Michael J. Fox type, and I was like, that's awesome. Everybody loves Michael J. Fox. And then she's like, yeah, but they don't really write roles for, kind of ethnic boy next door types, so, if you rapped her, she literally, she was being honest. She wasn't being cruel. She's like, if you rapped or you played basketball, there'd be a lot more opportunities for you in acting. But right now it's really just hard to cast somebody, of color and the kind of roles that you would really fit into. So instead of kind of giving up on Hollywood, because it's my dream has always been to work in film, I was like, well, let me just fall back on the writing. But I managed to just put some cameos in stuff. So at some point I'm going to write something with a bigger role for myself.
Yeah.
And then somebody will see me and be like, we need that guy in it, all kinds of things.
They're going to say, where has he been?
Yes.
Who is that and where has he been? Oh, yeah, we should have cast him 20 years ago.
Yeah. So that's the acting. That's the sometimes acting part. Is just, if there's a role in there, and I get friendly with all the directors of the films that I write, and if there's a role in there, especially if it's an indie film. But I've been able to do it on a couple of the bigger budget films too, where it's like, hey, if there's a role that I could do, it'd be great. And they usually will give me like a small role and stuff. So
that's so cool, man. Yeah, I didn't know about the acting part of it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As a ethnically ambiguous actor myself, it not until the last 5 or 6 years has it become a, hey, now we're looking for what we weren't casting.
I know, and that's what we have. That's what we have to explain to people so often, is because there's been such a focus on diversity now. there's been as there is with any progress, there's been a backlash of, people being like, oh, well, now you're just hiring people because of this. And I'm like, no, they're looking at there's a whole other pool of talent that they just never put on their radar. They never looked at it. And I've been in the casting sessions. Like I know for a fact, like we would have people come in that were of any race other than white. And they're like, wow, that was the best audition. But they're like, but it's not going to help sell the movie internationally. It's not going to, we don't know how it's going to play in the flyover states. And I think they underestimate the flyover states, but I know internationally there's kind of a checklist of actors, of non-white actors that have value if you're looking for financing. And it's a very tiny, tiny, tiny list internationally. So
Yeah.
it's been a lot of business decisions in the past. And I think, but as the world's changing and people got like going, oh, I guess, after, Black Panther and other movies that were super black or in the Rich Asians movie, which I'm not saying the whole title right, but
Oh yeah, Crazy
Rich Asians.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we can, people will go see movies as long as it's good. They don't care. So it's been really nice to have that change happen in the last 5 years, but it's also very frustrating to have to, listen to all this backlash chatter. It's a blessing and a curse that we've moved forward. But yes,
Yeah,
I'm glad that we're having more opportunities to work in the field that we want to work in.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've listened to you tell a story in several different interviews, but I do want to take a moment to go back to you growing up, loving cinema, and how you came upon wanting to write in the first place. Where did that come from through you? Have you always wanted to be a storyteller as well, or how did
Yeah,
that
you know
start?
what? I grew up in Eastern Kentucky and loved growing up there. We didn't have television for a long time, and then we finally, the big deal was when we got television. But it was cable. It was an actual cable that ran up our holler, and so anytime there was rain or snow, it would knock the TV out, and so sometimes we'd go for a week or two without TV. So my mom was always she always instilled in me from a young age how important education was and reading. And so my mom she was very eclectic. I mean, she was a great woman. She had us when she was 50. So she'd been through a lot of history.
Wow.
And so she would have books like Greek mythology books. She would have science fiction books. She didn't have any horror books. But I really started off loving Greek mythology and kind of growing up. I mean, Eastern Kentucky back when I was a child was the area that I lived in. Like it was me, my sister, and two other people of color in grade 0 through college. So in that whole region, so we were the first that they had ever seen. So it definitely was an adjustment for everybody, and so there was kind of a lot of racism and stuff that I dealt with as a child. And so I definitely like to kind of escape into like reading and fantasy stuff, and writing was a big writer at a young age. And I ended up getting with some friends, like this little three amigos we would just watch horror films a lot at my friend's house. And I did always know that I wanted to work in the film industry. Like I was home once and one of my cousins told me, she's like, she said, I asked you when you were 7 what you were going to do when you grew up, and you said you were going to be a movie star. So I always had the dream that I wanted to work in the entertainment industry because I just was fascinated by movies and TV and just seeing a world outside of the world that I lived in. And the best way to do that for me at the time was to tell stories. And, I put on little plays for my family. I mean, my cousins would do some plays and things like that. So it's always been in my blood. It's always been in my blood.
Wow. The fact that your mother had a whole life before becoming a mother, I'm sure she instilled, outside like Greek mythology, just an overall perspective that you wouldn't expect from parents who had kids, in their 20s. I'm sure
Yeah.
that came with it too.
Yeah, like I mean, she just had lived such a rich life, and again, like even her music collection was very eclectic. It was like country music, but it was also blues and gospel and some pop music, and so I got a very eclectic, like when I was growing up, appreciation for all the different kind of art forms out there, and yeah, she had a lot of stories. She had a lot of stories, and she moved us there when we were young to take care of her parents. So, um, so she worked really hard. Like she was taking care of them, taking care of her brother who had a mental illness, and was raising us. And we moved there also to be there. But my dad was out of the picture. I just tell all my business. I grew up in a trailer. That's how I am. But my mom found out my dad was cheating on her, and she left him. And this was back in the like 70s, like when most women would not. That's not, she married a black man and before the civil rights movement,
Mhm.
and then but she also divorced him and left him because he was cheating on her. And most women wouldn't do that. They would stick with their husbands. I saw it through with so many other people. So she was a very strong woman, and she kind of instilled that kind of morality in me,
Yeah.
just like don't cheat, don't worry about what other people think, follow your heart, and work hard. It's very much like study, learn, and work hard, and you can do whatever you want with your life, except be an actor. She always he's like, well, you can be an actor, but you really need to make sure you get a real job. And so I went to college, and I didn't tell her I was majoring in theater. But then I got cast. Started getting cast in plays, and so I finally had to tell her because I wanted her to come see the plays. And she's like, "You lied to me," but she was actually impressed and happy when she saw me acting. So she's like, "Okay,
That's when okay, I have full belief in this now. It's not just a
okay,
phase.
yes,
Okay.
yeah." I think I told her I was majoring in like science or something like that, and I
Oh
was
my
just like,
God.
"I know." How's science going? Great.
Geology's going really well.
Yeah.
Just reading through like a textbook. Oh yeah, we did this thing and that thing.
Oh, I didn't even go that far. I'm just like,
No.
no, because I was like, yeah, it's great. We're learning a lot of stuff, and then I would just change the subject because I was afraid she would start asking me stuff, and I wouldn't know the answer.
That is well, they have a name for that, just like how slick
Lying to the
a
mom.
child can be. Well, yeah, when it comes to lying, there's like some weird slang for it now. Like, God, I wish I would have known that. That's the fact that she, showed her support is fantastic, and she passed on that work ethic to you, and it sounded like it paid off because didn't you write a script for Nightmare on Elm Street at like 14 or
Oh,
something? And
I wrote yeah, and everybody's heard this story, but um, and I have to start with how much I love Nightmare on Elm Street. Like I'm actually wearing Nightmare on Elm Street shirt.
yeah, he's got the shirt.
And I have a little Freddy Krueger. You can't see him. He's over a little stuffed Freddy Krueger in the corner. But that movie literally changed my life because up until then, I had loved horror movies, but me and my friends, we were like teenagers, so we were watching it for the blood and the guts, and my two friends were like in for the titties, like that's all they cared about for horror films. And so Nightmare on Elm Street was the first film because I remember they marketed it as like fantasy horror. Like I remember the previews were like fantasy horror, and I was like, I've never heard of this. And when I saw that movie, it blew me away on so many levels. Just the story, I think Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp, is honestly the first really strong horror final girl. Like as far as being proactive, I'm not talking about I'm not dissing any of the other ones, but I think a lot of the other final girls up until her were written they were just the good girl who ended up surviving at the end. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis is one of my favorite actresses of all time. But if you watch Halloween, I mean, she does run and she stabs Michael a couple of times. But Nancy was the first one who got a book on booby trapping the house. She, got when nobody believed her, she's like, I'm going to bring this fucker out and kill him. Sorry for cursing. They just come out when I'm on podcasts for some reason.
Oh, this is uncensored.
Okay. Well, fuck yeah, because when I get on podcasts, like I don't mean to, it's just cursing slips out. But she's like, I'm going to go in and get this fucker. She went into the dream after him. She pulled him out. She fought like it. I was like, and just the way that Wes Craven melded the fantasy world with the dream world, I just felt it blew my mind as to what you could do with horror and made me like fall in love with it. So yeah, I went home and I banged out a prequel on a typewriter, and I sent it to Bob Shaye. I called information in New York and got their address and like mailed it up there. And I got an unsolicited, we don't take unsolicited material letter from Bob. And I was like, I wrote him back and I was like, look, sir, I've seen 3 of your movies and I've spent like $3 on your stuff. So I think you can take 5 minutes and read my story. And he read it. He read it and got back to me. And him and his assistant, Joy Mann, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, like really took me under their wings. And Joy would send me scripts and posters and just really, just really encouraging me. And I would read the scripts and like figure out how they were formatted. I learned so much from just reading scripts and just having that encouragement. So when I went to New York when I was 19, I finagled an internship at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts through a school program. And I went there for the summer, and then they offered me an internship at New Line while I was there. And things were, because I was getting a lot of background work, that was the thing. Like Spike Lee shot Mo Better Blues, and I got background in that, and a couple other movies, and started getting background work on All My Children because one of the girls in my class, her mom, I didn't know this, was a casting director for All My Children. So everybody else, I guess, knew it in the class, and so everybody was trying to be friends with her, but I didn't know it, and me and her ended up just kind of hitting it off, and she realized, I guess, that I didn't know who I'm from Kentucky. I don't know didn't know all the nations of the industry. So I started getting a lot of extra work. So I'm like, oh, this acting's easy. And I'm working at New Line, so I'm just going to stay in New York. And so I stayed in New York, and I did go back 1 year to finish college, and things didn't quite work out, but I think it was for the best. I just think I was meant to be there. So I stayed at New Line, and they created a position for me, and I worked there for 11 years. I worked. I sold the Nightmare on Elm Street, or Final Destination. I sold this treatment in '97. It came out in 2000. I'm still working there. I sold the treatment for the story 2000, maybe early 2001, but I think it was 2000. And finally they were like, Jeffrey, we love you, but you need to leave the nest now. Like, you are a writer, we love you here, but you're a big boy writer now. Like, go out and be a writer, because I'm very much a creature of habit. I'm like, oh, I get to stay, I can work. I don't know why I was like, I could just work here and still write. And yeah, it was just, so they gently pushed me out of the nest to go out into the real world and just focus on my career, which was great.
Wow. Well, and after that happened, where was your head at with the sort of new lease on life? Was it full of like adrenaline based fear, excitement? Like, did you have a game plan after that happened, or did you just give yourself a year to say, let's see what happens with X, Y, and Z?
You know what? It was weird because the great thing about working at a studio was that I learned to separate my ego from my work a lot, because I would see a lot of great scripts come through, and then I would see a lot of not great scripts come through that had an actor attached or a director attached, and they would go with the packaged script. So I learned from being inside the machine that there are so many decisions that aren't based on the quality of the script. that really helped me. And I always just like to tell people that, because if you're any kind of artist, actor, director, writer, there are so many decisions that happen behind the scenes that have nothing to do with your talent. Like, giving a great audition is so important, but there are 50 other factors that you have no control over. And some of it's, and I'll get back to your point, but like, I've been in casting sessions where like a great actress would come in or a great actor would come in, and one of the people in the room would be like, "Oh, you know what? She looks like my ex-girlfriend. I can't work with her," even though she was amazing. So, and sometimes it was like, well, we need to, we've already cast 2 blondes, so we need a brunette, and even though the blonde was great, I guess she could dye her hair, but just so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes that I always think it's important for anybody who's in the arts to understand. It's hard to separate your, validating yourself from how people see your work, but you have to understand, especially on a professional level, that there's, again, so many things that are on top of the final decision that whenever you get a rejection, you've got to process and like let it roll off you. And so I learned that, but I didn't really have a game plan because I kind of grew up in the studio. So if I had been a typical somebody who knew the business from a different angle, like the minute I sold Final Destination, because I was working in New York, I would have moved to Los Angeles, to start taking meetings. And I was just kind of blissfully in my bubble, just writing. And so when I left, I got a couple of things that I started working on, but then 9/11 happened, and I lived like 5 blocks from the World Trade Center. So, my roommate and I decided to move to LA, very, very quickly. So that happened like maybe 3 months after I left New Line. So I didn't have much time. Life kind of made me change my plans. So then I moved out to LA, and that was great. But then I was in a new environment. I knew some people who had moved out over the years, but I hadn't made the industry connections that I would have made if I'd have been working out of New Line in LA. So I knew kind of a whole separate group of people. So it was really trying to acclimate myself, and I almost had to reestablish myself because I hadn't been here. So the director and his writing partner, who James Wong and Glenn Morgan, who did an amazing job on the film, but they were getting all the credit for the movie. By the time I moved out here, everybody's like, "Who the hell are you?" I'm like, my name's on that poster there twice. For Final Destination. I don't know if you ever looked at the actual credits, but so it's kind of a restarting thing. I mean, granted, the Final Destination thing got me into rooms, but it was almost like my agent had to like reintroduce me to like the town. And then I started getting meetings and getting some jobs, and it was a whole process.
Wow. Well, how long did it take? Because I can only imagine moving from, say, like a state away, but moving across the country into a different part of the industry in a different region. How long did it take for you to feel comfortable again, especially in like Los Angeles of all places?
I don't know what it is. I don't know what is about my personality. I adjust like very quickly to new places. Like, I mean, I went from Kentucky to New York, and didn't, and that loved New York especially back in the day, like, I was younger. So all the hustle and bustle was really exciting. And I'd watched Fame growing up. So I thought going to New York was going to be like Fame. I'm like, where are the kids dancing in the streets? So coming to LA was not a culture shock. The weather's beautiful. I had, when I moved to New York, when I moved to LA, I'm gay. So I wanted to make sure that I found like a safe space, where I wouldn't get beaten up or killed. Yeah. So I moved to West Hollywood and, had some friends already out here, but just kind of really quickly kind of met a group of friends out here and settled in. And then, it's been a little bit too much time. I moved to the heart of, I moved to WeHo, which is like the super, like there's just a a strip of bars like a couple of blocks from me.
Oh no.
So that's, I've been sober for 15 years now, but I did when I first got here, I did kind of get more, I think I got a little off track on the business side because I was like, I wanted to, experience a gay culture here. And so I would just go out a lot drinking with my friends, which did still inspire me to work. But I acclimated very quickly, and I loved LA. I love the weather. There gets a point, and it didn't happen to me till COVID happened, and I finally took my first vacation in like 14 years. Like all of my trips, because my family was in Kentucky, so every trip I would take was either work related or going home to see my family. So I never had a proper vacation. And I took one at the tail end of COVID and traveled, and then I realized I don't need to. I still love New York or Los Angeles, but it's pretty damn expensive to live here. If it's pretty damn expensive to live here. So now I'm like, I may want to move now, but I don't know where.
I mean, hey man, you could easily move to Colorado. It's not too much cheaper than Los Angeles at this point. But it's the air's cleaner. I can say.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been to Colorado. There was they used to have a festival, the Mile High Horror Film Festival,
Yes.
and I was like I think I was one of their first guests, and so every year I would go back for that, and I loved it. Because the people are so nice, and I just had an amazing time there, just because everybody was so nice and wonderful. So I don't. The funny thing is now I'm spoiled because I don't know winters when it gets really cold and snowy.
Yeah.
I know I can't have my cake and eat it too, but I don't know. It's just an interesting time because I'm kind of reassessing, things as well, just with that. And I also wrote on some animated shows during COVID. One got nominated for an Emmy, which was awesome. And, so that was a whole new creative world for me and, animation. And so it's like, I'm never going to leave the horror genre because it's just so near and dear to me, but it's like a time where I am kind of assessing, like, what do I do? What do I want to write next?
Yeah. And do you have kind of an idea of where you want to go next? Are you thinking of maybe I want to try another animated project, or do you want to maybe you already have a plethora of horror scripts you want to get made?
Yeah, I've got some horror scripts that we're pushing to come out. There's a couple things I produced this horror film called The Bellkeeper. I'm actually going to Owensboro at the end of the month, Owensboro, Kentucky, to act in one of my friends' films. I've been producing it as well. And I have another animated show that's in development at Netflix. So right now, I think my focus is on, I want to write another TV pilot, mainly because my reps want me to. I do have a stack of scripts, and they're like, write it. We want a new pilot from you. So that's where my brain has been, the last month and a half, is just trying to figure out that right story that I want to tell. Kind of a supernatural story. I definitely want to set it in Appalachia because that's, where I grew up. And I think that region is usually stereotypically represented. And, I'd like to kind of show the kind of real Appalachia, which does include, certain things like, poverty and, there's an opioid addiction stuff going on down there. But you don't see the other side, which is just like people that are so loving and down to earth and would give you the shirt off their backs and hard working. You don't see all the positives. And so I do want to set something in Appalachia, and I want it to be supernatural, but I keep going back and forth with my friends. I'm like, I could do a murder mystery. They're like, do something supernatural. And I'm like,
Well, I don't know if you dove into the YouTube black hole that is, people monologuing supernatural horror stories set in the Appalachian Mountains, but
I saw.
there's
I just I just found that channel like maybe a week ago.
did you?
Whereas like stories of haunted Appalachia or like
Yeah.
notorious killers in Appalachia. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot that I'm kind of soaking in. Because yeah, if if I were when I write the pilot, I just want it to be really, strong, and
Yeah.
not that anything, not that I just crap out anything. Like I want everything I write to be really strong, but since it's my first pilot that I've written in a while, that wasn't a pre-existing, like the animated shows were already based on other properties. So I really want to write, you know, something special. So it's all percolating, and I just every time I go to sleep, I'm like, please God, let me have a dream that puts it all together. And so far, God has not listened to my prayers. But maybe I'll start praying to say, I'm kidding.
There are listeners, he has a really suspicious black cauldron on one of his shelves behind him. I don't know what that's about, but I can only
Wait,
imagine.
there's not a cauldron. I go look.
This is always really fun to ask because I wanted to be a writer before I was ever an actor. And
Mm.
I still do both. I still write consistently, but I always love hearing about the writing processes of, other writers. So I wanted to ask you, do you have are you very tedious with your writing process? Are you a note card person? Are you going to bleed all over dry erase and chalkboards and, kind of put everything together Sherlock style? What's your writing process like?
You know what? I wish I had a specific process because I think I'd be a lot. Here's what because when I was at New Line, you could sell treatments, so I was very big into it's gotten easier. It's very hard for me to pitch something without writing the thing out, like like a 10-page treatment that has like the whole movie from start to finish laid out. So that's kind of how I grew up. That was my process growing up, because you could sell those. Nowadays, they want to pitch, and they also want you to bring in actors, and it's like, wait a minute, that's your job. So now that the world has changed, I'm trying to move away from writing treatments for everything and just writing beat sheets. I have found when I have used note cards on projects, it's been amazingly efficient and has been so helpful, because you can just move stuff around. But I don't do it. I don't. There's a part of me, I don't know. Like it's just I know I've done it. I did it on a couple of shows where we had the note cards up, and it's like, I am going to do this forever because it's so easy just to help. And I just never. I bought a little whiteboard, but it's too little to write out the whole thing on. And then I bought a bigger cork board. And I'm like, and I could just tape the sticky notes to my wall. That's what I need to do. That would be the most efficient. I think for me, the outline is good, because then you kind of know your beginning, your middle, your halfway point, your ending. But I do think the process of having the note card system, when I've worked, especially when you're breaking down something and you need to really figure out where the scenes fit best, or if you're breaking out like a season of shows, I found that to be extremely like efficient and effective. It's just I don't follow my own experience and our own advice sometimes, because I like to make work hard for myself.
You know what? Based on every other writer I've talked to on this podcast, everybody has the same thing in common. It's like, I do want to do this, but I tend to do this.
Yeah. I'm great at giving advice, and I know what would make my life a lot easier. But yeah, and also my process, and I'm trying to do this pilot different. My process used to be to come up with a concept first, because I know that that's what's going to get somebody's interest when you're talking to them. But having worked on, which is funny, just having worked on the animation cartoons, especially the one I'm developing now, it's like I laid out the first season, and then the producer's like, I want you to go back and I want you to relay out this season, but from the emotional journey of the characters, and focus on that. And so when I did that, it actually tied everything together and made everything feel more deep and important. And so even though I want to come up with a good concept, I'm trying to come up with my characters first this time. Because usually I come up with a concept and then I come up with some cool characters, but I'm not thinking about too deeply, because I'm just usually trying to sell a pilot, and then a pitch. So I'll talk about their emotional journey, but I haven't, that didn't used to be my focus. So that's one thing I'm changing this go around, is I'm trying to create the characters and set it in the world and then see what kind of story kind of bubbles up, as opposed to going concept, characters, then outline.
I'll tell you, I mean, more than anybody else, but to those who are listening, doing all of that mentally drains the hell out of you.
Yes.
So with, we started the show during the pandemic, and one of the bigger questions was what keeps you sane outside of your job, outside of writing, outside of acting, outside of producing? What do you like to do that helps you decompress, relax, kind of enjoy life for a little bit outside of the industry? Do you have anything that keeps you satiated?
You said outside of the industry. Literally, my decompression is watching movies and watching TV shows. And at some point that'll change. Like I do look at watching movies as research. That because that's how you put it on your taxes. So, but I've always had simple things in life make me happy. Like I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't, I loved growing up in Kentucky, but if somebody wants to go like hiking in the mountains, I'm like, so honestly, what keeps me happy is like watching good movies, and TV at this point, it's funny when I talk to a lot of my friends, because they're like, we always talk about the business, and I'm like, well, I don't have, I'm single, so I don't have a personal life. And, all I do, because I'm still trying to, because when you have a movie that's as successful as Final Destination, like everybody assumes, like if you Google my net worth online, it says like $5 million, which is insane. Like nowhere near, you know what I'm saying? Like nowhere in that arena. So I'm like, no wonder people always write me up, want me to finance their films. But that, I don't know how they put that figure together, but it's mentally draining to work on something. And I think a lot of times when you work with producers, they don't understand that. They're like, oh, well, just change this and this and this. And I'm like, yeah, but that changes like the whole movie. But I'll do it. And they're like, okay, can you turn it in tomorrow? It's like, hell no, it's a lot of work. Like you don't realize how much work you're asking me to do. So that's also another reason I got a little bit more into producing as well, is it's a fun world. And then I can help other filmmakers that I believe in, try to get their stuff made. So, that's been a fun diversion, but I wish I had some cool answer, like, I go skydiving or, something like that to decompress. Or even I do yoga or something, but I know it's like when I have free time, it's like I'm watching movies. Yep. Watching TV shows. I still have like a lot of shows that DVR. So
you know what? We get so much yoga on this show. It's always refreshing to not hear that for an episode.
Yeah. No, I would get too bored. I have ADD too, so like it's hard for me to center myself and calm myself. But then going to a yoga class, I'm like, no.
I mean, I'm going to pay $80 for 45 minutes of torture.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm so excited. Uh, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure you have something in your arsenal, especially working for New Line for all those years. But if you have a party story you could share with our listeners, so something that has occurred, doesn't have to be within the walls of New Line or on set, but anything that's happened in your life that stands out so immensely. Could be humorous, could be tragic, could be ironic, could be scary, but something you could easily recant amongst friends at a party. Do you have anything in your arsenal you could pull out for the listeners?
Oh my gosh, since you gave me so many options of, I was going to go with the guy fucking our cow when I was a kid, but I think I'll go with a different story.
Oh my fucking god!
No, because, well, the thing is, there are two things. Um, the first time I ever got starstruck, because working at New Line, I met a lot of huge, huge actors and actresses, and never got starstruck. I didn't even know what starstruck kind of meant. But aside from Nightmare on Elm Street, the original miniseries, is like my favorite show of all time. And Jane Badler, who played Diana on that, is brilliant, and loved her. And so when I directed my first short, I just reached out to her through her agent to see if she would do it, in just a small bit. And she was in Australia, and she's like, sure. And so, like, I directed her over, online, and she went out and she shot this, and then we became friends. And she came to LA, and she's like, oh, would you like to meet for lunch? I was like, absolutely. And I went to lunch, and I sat down with her, and my brain could literally not, like, that was the first time I've ever been starstruck. I'm like, oh, this is what it means. Because I couldn't think of what to say, and like, I was just overwhelmed, and it felt like I was like, I can't believe I'm sitting with Jane Badler. And finally I told her, I said, I have to stop for a second, because now I know what starstruck means, because I'm just, my brain is like not processing any of this stuff. So that's my sweet starstruck story.
Wow.
And I met Dolly Parton once. But yeah, a drunk guy did fuck a cow on our farm, and my mom had gone to the store, and he was this really well-known super drunk guy that lived up our holler, and yeah, he came down and fucked our cow. And then I told my mom, and she took a shotgun up to his place and told him that if he ever came on our property again, she'd kill him. And he never came back and never fucked our cow again.
Oh my god!
So there, I left you with something.
I was perfectly happy with the first one. I would be lying if I wasn't thinking about the second one. Just oh my, okay.
I mean, I can tell you how he did it. I mean, not without being graphic. No, he just
A step stool.
No, he put corn down, and I was like looking out the window. I'm like, what the hell is he doing? He's like, put corn down in front of the cow to feed it, and then he got a bucket and got up on the bucket.
Oh my god!
Yeah. Now, this is not a normal occurrence in Kentucky. This might be a normal occurrence for alcoholics, super hardcore alcoholics who are desperate.
Poor cow.
I know. I'll you whether you want to cut that part out or not.
I'll leave that up to you. You
Oh,
let me
I
know
don't.
in the
I
next
didn't.
couple
I didn't
weeks.
fuck a cow, so I don't.
I'd love to keep that in, because that's
Oh yeah, no, I didn't.
insane.
Yeah, no, that was that's the craziest story that I have. Yeah.
Please write a really amazing movie about your mom, because she
Yeah.
sounds like a complete badass.
Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I've already gone over a little bit, but I just have a few more things to wrap up this interview. I wanted to see if you had any advice you could instill upon our listeners, whether they are, writing, acting, just anything that has to do with the arts industry. Maybe it's a piece of advice that's, kept you going, for your
Yeah.
career, or something you've heard and you really believe in. Is there anything you can share with our listeners?
Well, I think the first thing about separating your ego from your work is probably the most important piece of advice, because I just know so many people who are like, well, I'm going to give this 2 years, and if it doesn't work out, and when I first went to New York, it's like I got an agent and I started doing the background stuff really quickly. And I was like, screw that 10-year rule. Cut to, it was 10 years to the year I graduated high school that I sold Final Destination. So it does take a lot of patience and persistence. I think now with technology the way it is, that people hate when you tell them this, but it's like, if you can create your own content, even if it's a short, if it's stuff to, it not only hones your skills, but it also, there's ways to get your work out there in the world that people can see it. And if you can get enough buzz going around it, it doesn't matter. Because that's the thing, you can shoot movies no matter where you live, and if they're quality enough, you can find places that will put them out. Or you can even put them up on YouTube just to get an audience, to start watching your work. So I think that there's never been a better time, because, when I was growing up, we had the cameras you had to put the VHS tapes in them. Like, so very, very, like the technology you have now on your iPhone is like, it's crazy what people can do. I think the other good advice is if you want to be a good artist, you've got to surround yourself with good people. You don't want people that just are going to say everything you do is great, but you need to find the right kind of people, like, especially to evaluate your work. Like, you don't want the people that are going to love everything you want to do. You don't want people who are going to hate everything that you do. If you're a writer, you don't want to have people giving you notes on like, well, if this was my movie, this is how I would have written it, because that's not what it is. But you want to just find the people that are just going to be honest with you, but also keep you going, like, creatively. Because making a living in the arts, like every writer, director, actor I know, even the really successful ones, there's always times where they're like, I had to take this side gig that's not even in the industry that I can't tell anybody, not anything shady, but it's just like, I was working at this place and, and things like that. So, yeah, it's a tough, well, like any industry, it's a tough business. And if you want to rise to the top or stay at it, it's really about always growing. So that's why I think it's important to always be open to constructive criticism. Like the biggest problem I see with a lot of writers is they'll want notes from people, but then they will argue with every single note that the person says. And it's like, especially if you get 3 people telling you the same thing, listen. But if you have the right people, it shouldn't take 3 people. Like, once you think that everything you write is gold, like, you're screwed. Like, and you see this with some famous writer directors where their first movie is like amazing, and then their second movie, obviously nobody, because their first movie did so well, nobody told them no on their second movie. So then their movies start going off into crazy land because they're not getting any parameters. And then at some point they finally realize, oh, and then they get back on track again. So you don't want to do that in your life before you get your first thing done. You don't want to, not listen to other people and be like, well, I'm going to break all the rules because this one movie broke all the rules and was a success. It's like, yeah, but that person had had other movies under their belt, So I think always growing, again, keeping yourself surrounded by good people. Don't get caught up in the partying life of Hollywood. It's very, and it's not even Hollywood, it's just the industry. Like, if I've lost so many friends to like drug addiction and alcoholism, either through them dying from it or committing suicide over it. And this is inside the industry and outside the industry too. It's like, just, addiction is such a big problem. So it's easy when you're writing, because a lot of times you're very isolated and solitary. It's very easy to all of a sudden realize, wow, I'm drinking more and more and more. And then you start thinking that your work is only going to be good if you're drinking. And so I always tell people, without judgment, because there's a lot of people out there that can drink and do their weed or whatever and handle it fine and just have 1 or 2 drinks and be done with it. But, if you find yourself struggling, like, get help, and because then you're so much easier and able to tap into that creative stuff inside of you, but authentically, not the drunk kind of like, this is great. So I know that was a lot.
No, it was all of it is so pertinent and so important for everybody to hear.
Those are just like and those are the lessons that I've learned. Like
Yeah.
everybody had different experiences, but those are the lessons that I've learned for myself, is like persistence, patience, believing in yourself, even though it gets hard sometimes. And just keep creating, like keep doing it, even if you have to take a side job. There was one point in my career where things looked great on IMDb, but I had to take a side job, like selling a law school program to grad students for like a summer. Just because there was a lack of work there for a while, and I had to pay the bills. So, don't judge your career by other people's careers. Don't judge your life by their social media, because obviously that job was never on any of my social media. It was only cool stuff. But yeah, and just if it's in your heart, like if it's like what you are really drawn, like, like, because I knew from a young age, like, this is what I was going to do. And so if in your heart of hearts, like, this is what you want to do, I do believe that if you stick with it long enough and you keep growing, your work will fall into the right hands, or find the right person will see it at the right time. And that's all it takes, is that one yes,
God, after you said that, I wish I was wearing I made custom shirts that say "Don't give up" on the chest, and God, I wish I was wearing that right now. Yeah, this is a tough business. I'm 10 years in, and I hit that dip. I was like, what am I gonna do? What's gonna happen? Yeah, I think everything you said is so pertinent and true, and it has to be said. So I want to thank you for sharing that, but I also want to see, what can we give a shout out / a promotion to in this episode? Is there something that you're really excited about? Maybe an organization you really care about? Is there anything that I can promote with this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I would say feel free to follow me on social media. Jeffrey A. Reddick, that's my handle at Twitter and Instagram. But where you can hear about any of my new projects. But I think the Trevor Project, if there's a project that I am passionate about, absolutely. It's a really great organization that helps deal with young LGBTQ people, and helps them, especially suicide. There's the suicide rate among my community is so high among young people because of all the shit that's out there in the world. So the Trevor Project is a great resource for those kids. And if anybody wants to do anything, I think volunteer or donate, it would be amazing, or just spread the word about the Trevor Project.
We've had a few people recently share that, and I'm so glad it's getting more name recognition and people going in and giving their support any way they can. I really appreciate that. Well, as we're closing out this episode, this recording, my coffee is kicked in way too hard. I just want to say, like, thank you for your time, man. I've been an admirer of yours for a very, very long time, so it's nice to finally chat with you and get to hear about your story, your badass mom, and just everything you've been doing. Before we wrap up, I have one question to ask you. Have you ever seen Wayne's World?
I've seen it, not religiously. So I've seen it a couple times, but
okay.
I should have just said I've seen it. Yes, but I thought you might ask me for my favorite quote. And I'm like, I don't know.
No. I this is completely off kilter. We have what we call an awkward goodbye for this show, and it's essentially the scene where Wayne leaves the corporate production stage and leaves Garth by himself. So what I do is I give you a silent Wayne's World cameraman countdown, and when I give you the point, give me your best verbal awkward goodbye, and I'll stop the recording from there. Does that sound fun?
Okay, so just say something intentionally awkward.
Oh yeah. Just super awkward.
Okay.
You ready for that? Okay, I'm gonna go from 3. Here we go. In.
So I hate to do this, but I have to go change my kitty litter box because my agent's coming over and I'm meeting with Tom Cruise to star in his next movie. So sorry, but gotta go.